All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies class, I've been going through a series, really creating a series of video presentations that are based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I'm in the JavaScript portion talking web APIs and in particular third-party APIs. In the last video, I started to go through the steps for the New York Times API. So the first thing I'm supposed to do is find the line that says let key. And put my key in there. There it is. Add the following functionality line to your JavaScript below the event listeners to control functionality comment. Oops. Okay. Now add the submit search and fetch results to the previous line, below the previous line. Okay. All right. First thing there is submit search. All right. As it says, it sets the page number back to 0 to begin with, then calls fetch results, which is here. The first calls prevent default, which means don't submit the form. Typically, for example, you use things like the prevent default if there is a hyperlink there and you want to be able to click on it without having it literally leave the page you're currently on. All right, next we use some string manipulation to assemble the full URL that we will make the request to. We start off by assembling the parts we deem mandatory for this example, which is the URL, base URL, the API key, which has to be specified in the value taken from the key variable, the page number, the search term, etc. And it says there, we will use a couple of if statements to check whether the start date and end date values have been filled in. If they do, we append the values to the URL. Okay, so the completed URL would have all this stuff there in it. Okay, you can find more examples to be included in the developer docs area. This example has some rudimentary form validation. The search term field has to be filled in before the form can be submitted, and the date fields have pattern attributes associated with them. Now that you've constructed it, let's make a request to it using the fetch API. Add the following just above the closing curly brace. Again, no idea if this will work, and I did not put in the right thing that I was checking for to begin with, but we'll look at it anyway. All right. Here we run the request by passing our URL variable to fetch, convert the response body to JSON using the JSON function, then pass the resulting JSON to the display text function so it can be displayed in our URL. Okay, let's look at how we'll display the data. Add the following below your fetch results function. There's the fetch results. All right. And as it says there, there's a lot to wrap around this. So let's try to do this. Let's move this down, go back up to the top, and kind of go through it so we can see both of these. The while loop that's here is a common pattern used to delete all of the contents of a DOM element. In this case, the section element. We keep checking to see if the section element has a first child. All right. And if it does, we remove that. It ends when there are no longer any children. Okay, and that's what this is doing here. Next, we set the articles variable equal to json.response.docs, the array holding all of the objects that represent the articles returned in the search. As it says, this is done to make the code simpler. The first if checks to see if 10 articles are returned. The API returns up to 10 articles at a time. If so, display the nav that contains the previous and next 10 page. So in other words, you're able to paginate your way through it. The next if checks to see if no articles are returned. If so, we don't try to display any. We instead create a paragraph that says no text, no results returned. All right. If some articles were returned, we first of all create the elements we want to use to display each news story, insert the right contents, and then insert them into the DOM in the appropriate place. So it's doing all the work for us, in other words. It says most of these operations are fairly obvious, but a few are worth calling out. The for loop that we see here loops through all of the keywords associated with each article and inserts each one inside its own span inside of a paragraph. So this was done, as it says, to style each one. We used an if here to check whether each article has any images associated with it. Some stories don't. We display the first image only if it exists, otherwise an error would be thrown. We give our div a class of clearfix so that we can easily apply clearing to it. All right. To make the pagination work, we will increment or decrement the value of the page number variable, and then rerun the fetch request with the new value included in this parameter. It works because it returns only 10 results at a time. This allows us to write simplistic pagination functionality easily. Below the existing add event listener call, add these two new ones, which cause the next page and previous page buttons to be invoked when clicked. All right, so by the current add event listener, all right, there's one. Is that the only one that's in here? Yes, it is. So we want to put it there. Okay, so we've got those. And then we are told that down below that, we are to add in this. It says here the function is simple. We increment the page number variable and we run the fetch results function again to display the next page's results. The second page works the same way but in reverse. All right, it says you can find this finished one on GitHub and see a live version here. Well, I'm going to put mine in there anyway. Not holding out a boatload of hope that this is going to actually work, but you never know. All right, so that's it with everything in there. Let's just run it just for the heck of it and see what, if anything, happens. All right, enter a single search item, enter a start date and an end date. Well, this was the movies. New movies. How about at the theater? Oh, that'll work. A quiet place too. That should work. So a quiet place. What's that in there? 2, it's Roman numerals. 2. And we'll enter a start date. Let's just put in the middle of last month. So 05/15/2021. And let's, for the end date, let's put today. 06/01/2021. Submit search. And of course, nothing happens. Well, we did get that in there, so that's at least good news. Let's go in and try to run their running example. So enter a search item. I'll put the same thing in here. Quiet place 2. Enter a start date 05/15/2021. Today's date 06/01/2021. Submit search. Oh, there you go. Well, that's what was supposed to happen. All right. All right, it says we also built another example for you to learn and study from. Our YouTube video search example, which uses the YouTube Data API and the YouTube iframe player API. All right. And they talk about what you have to do to get it running. This would be a great one to go through probably as a class. So this looks like it's right here. Let's put me in there. Jeff Scott Rankin Technical College. Just see if it comes up with anything. Or not. Well, what if we put the same thing in? Quiet place 2. Well, it still isn't showing anything, but that's fine. All right. So again, what I attempted to do in here, maybe not successfully, but was to give you at least an introduction into the use of third-party APIs. So when we come back, we'll be in drawing graphics. All right. And we will talk, it says this, the browser contains some very powerful graphics programming tools like SVG, which we've talked about earlier, scalable vector graphics, to APIs for drawing on HTML canvas elements. This article provides an introduction of the canvas. So when I come back, what we've got left in here is drawing graphics, video and audio APIs, and client-side storage. Okay, so I'll be back with that shortly.